From the entrance of Chinese OEMs, the smartphone market has boiled a lot, and so with their latest offerings, the company shows us that you don't need to shell flagship to get a flagship experience. But the sub $400 market is even more convoluted than that of a flagship. So let me make it easy for you to choose the best of the best smartphone under $400. That doesn't actually feel like a $400 one. But before we do, a huge shout out to all my viewers who helped in my previous video, the top 5 budget smartphone under $250 crossed 10k views. And enough about my past now. My name is Jonathan, this is Tech Teachers, and these are the top 5 best smartphone under $400 or 28k. Let's get started. Just as a disclaimer, all the smartphones in this list have a fingerprint scanner either at the front or at the back, so they may not be mentioned separately. So starting off, the fifth spot in our list goes to a smartphone which ironically comes under the few phones in the world which are priced lower in India than in China. Yes, I'm talking about Lenovo Vibe X3. As always, let's start with the build. And the Lenovo Vibe X3 has a polycarbonate back and metal to the sides, which feels quite sturdy. The Vibe X3 has a 5.5-inch Full HD IPS display with 401 ppi, and yes, it isn't the most pixel-dense one, but this display covers 100% NTSC color gamut, which makes it as good as an AMOLED panel and is the best 1080p display available in the market. And as a cherry on top, it is also protected by Corning's Gorilla Glass 3. And enough about display now. The Vibe X3 is powered by a hexa-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 chip. So that's a combo of 2 high-performance Cortex A57 cores clocked at 1.8 GHz each, plus 4 power-efficient Cortex A53 cores clocked at 1.4 GHz each, coupled with 3 GB of RAM and 32 GB inbuilt storage. Now, some of you nerds watching this video might say that, oh John, Redmi Note 3 with Snapdragon 650 has better cores than 808, so it may reside in better performance. But no my friends, 808 was a flagship chip and was built on a better nanometer process, so it stands neck to neck with the Snapdragon 650 or even Snapdragon 652, and that too coupled with Adreno 418 GPU, the Vibe X3 performs great. Coming on to the USP of the device, the Vibe X3 has dual front firing speakers with a dedicated DAC or digital to analog converter, and is great, and it can easily outperform the HTC 10. The camera isn't flagship level but is still great in this price segment with that 21 megapixel f2.2 aperture and Sony IMX230 sensor on the back and an 8 megapixel f2.2 sensor on the front as well. Good stuff. And the Vibe X3 can also shoot 4K 30fps video and is good, but it would have been great if it had OIS. The Vibe X3 also has a support for USB OTG and is powered by a 3500 mAh non-user replaceable battery, and the battery life is great. The Vibe X3 runs on Android 5.1 Lollipop with Lenovo's Vibe UI on top, but the smartphone is upgradable to Android 6.0 Marshmallow. So overall, Lenovo has done a great job by launching the Vibe X3 at just 19,999 INR or about $350 internationally, and such is the reason why it is in the 5th spot in our list. So moving on, the 4th spot on our list goes to a smartphone which I wish I could put in the first place, but I can't as the competition is serious. And yes, believe it or not, it's the Xiaomi Mi 5. Starting off, the Mi 5 has a metal and glass construction which is quite similar to the Galaxy S7, and both the front and back has Gorilla Glass 4 for protection. And on the front, we have a 5.1-inch Full HD IPS display which is sharp and is quite bright, meaning sunlight legibility is great. The Mi 5 is powered by a flagship Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 chip with 3GB RAM and 32GB non-expandable storage. Now I don't need to explain how powerful Snapdragon 820 is, but one thing worth noting is that there are 3 models of the Xiaomi Mi 5 available internationally, but just the base model of the Mi 5 has been released in India, which has lower clock speed and just 32GB inbuilt storage which is non-expandable. And these are the only reason why I don't recommend Mi 5 to anyone who is a multimedia junkie, as he will run out of space easily, and that is not good. But what is good is that Mi 5 has a 16 megapixel Sony IMX298 sensor with f2.2 aperture and support for 4K recording, with a 4 megapixel ultra pixel camera on the front, and the rear camera also has 4-axis OIS which helps a lot in the video. And overall, the cameras on the Mi 5 are great and can stand neck to neck with much higher priced smartphones like the HTC 10 and even the Nexus 6P. Moving on, the Mi 5 runs on Android 6.0 Marshmallow with MIUI 7 on top and is great, and is powered by a 3000 mAh non-removable battery, and the battery life is good. Overall, the Mi 5 is a great phone for just 24,999, but due to slightly higher pricing than expected and non-expandable storage, the Mi 5 stays at the 4th spot in our list. The third spot in our list goes to a smartphone that is not yet released in India but is right around the corner, and it's the second phone from Lenovo in this list. Yes, I'm talking about Lenovo's UK Z2. Starting off, the Z2 has a fiber and glass construction which is quite sturdy and light. The Z2 has a 5-inch Full HD IPS display, and that's 441 ppi for those interested. The display is quite sharp and color accurate and is quite bright too. Underneath the hood, the Z2 is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 SoC. Now that's a flagship SoC, so the performance is great. The Z2 has an option to choose between 3GB RAM and 32GB inbuilt storage, or 4GB RAM and 64GB inbuilt storage. And the one that I would recommend is to go for 4GB plus 64GB option, as the Z2 doesn't have expandability and is just 2K pricier than the base model. Moving on, the Z2 sports a 13MP rear camera with f2.2 aperture and an 8MP front facing shooter. And here is where we see mid-range performance, as the camera performance is not that great. Now don't get me wrong, it's decent enough, but it's not as good as, let's say, the Xiaomi Mi 5 or the OnePlus 3. And yes, the Z2 can also shoot 4K videos and are again decent. It runs on Android 6.0 Marshmallow with ZUK's ZUI on top, and is pretty feature-rich UI. Finally, the Z2 is powered by a 3500 mAh non-removable battery, and the battery life is good. It's not as great as expected, but is good nonetheless. Overall, the Z2 that I recommend is priced at 1999 yuan, or about 20,000 INR, and for that price it's literally a steal. And the little compromises that are there are something that we can look past, but if camera is your priority, then look instead for Mi 5 or OnePlus 3 as mentioned earlier. And the smartphone that steals the second spot in our list is something that offers great bang for your buck. Yes, it's none other than the Echo Lumax 2. Not the higher end model, but the base model. Starting off, the Lumax 2 has a full metal unibody construction and is great. It feels as good as holding an iPhone. Moving on, the Lumax 2 has a 5.7-inch Quad HD IPS display, and the display is quite sharp with 515 ppi and is also protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 3. Underneath the hood, the Lumax 2 is again powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 SoC and is quite powerful with 4GB RAM and 32GB inbuilt storage. But if you want, you can get 6GB RAM and 64GB storage at 29,999 INR. But the one that we have in this list is the lower end model. Nonetheless, both the smartphones are equally powerful. The Lumax 2 is the first phone to ditch the 3.5mm headphone jack in favor of USB audio, resulting in a CDLA technology, which will help in high resolution audio. And the Lumax 2 runs on Android 6.0 Marshmallow with EUI on top, and is quite similar to any Chinese skins, but the device is quite fast. Moving on, the Lumax 2 has a 21MP rear camera with f2.0 aperture with OIS and 4K recording capabilities, and at the front we have an 8MP wide angle shooter, which is great. Although the rear camera feels quite good on paper, but it stands behind the devices like the Mi 5 or the OnePlus 3. Finally, the Lumax 2 has a 3100 mAh non-replaceable battery, which is not that good and is above average but will last you all day. And for the price of just 22,999, the device feels like a great option. The only caveat, however, is that it has a 32GB non-expandable storage, but if storage is your concern, you can go for the higher end model of the Lumax 2 or get the next smartphone in our list. And the first spot in our list goes to a smartphone. Actually, they're not one but two. The OnePlus 3 and the ZTE Axon 7. Yes, I couldn't decide between these devices, as both are something that can be said as true flagship killer and have little to no compromises. Let's start with the design. Both the smartphones are built great. The all-metal unibody construction on both smartphones look and feel great. Moving on, both the smartphones have a 5.5-inch AMOLED displays, but the Axon 7 has a Quad HD panel when compared to just Full HD on the OnePlus 3. Now don't get me wrong, the OnePlus 3 display is good, but the Axon 7 just blows it out of the water. Under the hood, both the smartphones are powered by the typical Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 SoC, but the OnePlus 3 has an overkill 6GB RAM when compared to 4 of the Axon 7. Both the smartphones have 64GB inbuilt storage, but the Axon 7 has a room for expansion as well. Coming on to the back, the Axon 7 has a 20MP rear camera with f1.8 aperture and OIS. On the other hand, the OnePlus 3 has 16MP rear camera with f2.0 aperture and OIS as well. Both the cameras can shoot 4K videos, and on paper at least, you might feel that Axon 7 has an edge over OnePlus 3, right? But such is not the case over here. Both the cameras stand neck to neck with each other, and OnePlus 3 holding slight advantage. And this is one among the few cases which shows that numbers aren't everything. The OnePlus 3 and Axon 7 run on Android 6.0 Marshmallow with their respective skins such as Oxygen OS and Mi Favor UI on top. Both the UI are quite good, but the Oxygen OS on the OnePlus 3 is just next level. One thing worth noting is that the Axon 7 has dual front-firing speakers with 2 dedicated DACs or DACs for superior audio quality, and these speakers are just next level. It can easily outperform any speaker on the market, including the HTC 10 and even the Lenovo Vibe X3. The OnePlus 3 is powered by a 3000 mAh battery with dash charging, but the Axon 7 has a slightly larger one at 3250 mAh battery with quick charge 3.0 support, but the battery life is quite identical. Overall, both the smartphones are great and are roughly for the same price, as $399 is the same internationally, and in India the OnePlus 3 is priced at 27,999 and Axon 7 is expected to launch in at the same price. So what I recommend is, if multimedia is your concern, then go for the Axon 7, and if 6GB RAM and cameras are your priority, go for the OnePlus 3, as the rest in both the smartphones stand neck to neck, and so both the smartphones are the best smartphone under $400 and can give flagships a run for their money. And so there you have it, all the best smartphones under $400 or 28,000. There are some honorable mentions such as the Alcatel Idol 4S, the Huawei Honor 8, and even the new BlackBerry DTech 50 is a good buy. But the phones listed above are just great, and getting either of these phones from the above list will be great. And that pretty much winds up the video. Hopefully enjoyed the content. If you did and feel like the one who's standing in the mid sunny day feeling, make sure to crack that like button. But if you thought this video sucked, you know what to do. And if you thought I didn't include any other phone that you were expecting, let me know in the comment section below. And finally, subscribe for more content. Until then, this has been your host Jonathan from Tech Teachers, reminding you to check out my previous video on the top 5 budget smartphone under $250 or the best budget headphones video. Links to the same can be found below. Until then, thanks for watching.